Physics Bites,
a science podcast in English by the students of Notre Dame.
Hello and welcome to a new episode of Physics Bites, the English language physics podcast of the students of Notre Dame. We have our penultimate group of the year this year. We have 3 students who are going to talk to us about biophysics. Do you guys want to present yourselves?
Hi, I'm Celeste.
Hi, I'm Anatole. Hey, hi, I'm Oscar.
So we have Celeste, Anatole, and Oscar, which you guys have heard last year. What did you guys present last year? What did you present, Celeste, last year? Which scientist?
I presented Johannes Kepler.
Right, Kepler was one of the final ones. What did you present?
Liz Meitner.
Right, and what did you present, Oscar?
Émile Duchâtelet.
Right. This year your project was a bit more ambitious. You guys were talking about biophysics, something close to my own heart. So why don't we get started with what you guys presented? Maybe we'll go one by one, what you guys each talked about, and then we'll get into some questions about there.
Okay. I start.
So Oscar.
I present what is biophysics. So biophysics is an interdisciplinary field of study that combines the principle of physics and biology to understand the physical and biological process in living systems.
Right. So if we can summarize it, basically we're solving biology problems, but the way physicists do it.
Yes.
Okay. So we're doing physics. It's just that we're not applying it to purely fundamental physics, but more biological problems. Okay.
Yes. They include the study of biological molecules, cells, tissues, and organs, as well as a larger scale physiological process and behavior of organisms.
All right. So one of the key words in what you said is an interdisciplinary topic. Anatole, what was your main part in the presentation?
I talk about direct application of biophysics, which was the circulation of blood in our body.
Right. So how we study the way blood moves in our vessels using physical methods, right? Mm. And we'll come back to that, to a few of the methods. And Celeste, what was your main topic?
I also talk about the application of biophysics, but instead of doing it at a scale of organs, I'm doing it at a molecular scale, and more specifically the thermodynamics in protein folding. Right,
protein folding, which was one of the big issues that was haunting, I guess, biology for a long time, and I think you'll get into it later on. And Oscar, did you talk about any specific applications as well, or no?
No, I just talked about the history.
Right. So why don't we start with that? Why don't we get started with a bit of the history of biophysics? Who was the first person to actually do what we would call today as biophysics?
He was a German scientist named Johannes Müller in the 1820s and 1830s that studied the light and color in organisms and living systems.
Okay, so it's a long time ago, but I guess it didn't really become a true discipline until the 20th century, right?
Yeah, with the discovery of X-ray by Pierre and Marie Curie.
Right, in France here.
In France, yes.
And then what other stuff have we sort of developed over time? Could you just give us a short timeline of it?
Yes, and after very recently we talked about bioinformatics.
Right, and this is a big revolution in the end of the 1990s, beginning of the 2000s. What is that? What is bioinformatics?
Bioinformatics is the use of computer and software to analyze a big and huge amount of data.
Right.
For example.
So how do we use computers other than, like, for example, we can think of imaging or maybe doing calculations, but why is bioinformatics considered like a big revolution?
Because it's very, very fast.
Right. So it does. What sort of problems did you encounter? Some examples, more concrete ones?
A gene sequence, for example.
Right. The study of genetics in general and sequencing and all that stuff was made easier with that. Okay, maybe we can move on to a few of the applications that you guys maybe want to talk about. Celeste, do you want to get started with some of that protein folding fun?
So what I basically tried to explain in my presentation is, I started out by defining what are favorable interactions and processes. And so the definition of that is interactions that occur spontaneously or naturally and release energy. And I kind of explained the first and second law of thermodynamics, and especially the concept of entropy. And then I kind of went over...
So why don't you tell us what these concepts are. What is enthalpy? What is entropy? Without going into necessarily a very detailed explanation, but what do they talk about, and why is it so important in our study of protein folding? And then finally we'll come back and see how physics was able to help us with this.
So enthalpy is a measure of the total energy in a thermodynamic system.
Right.
And then entropy is a measure of the number of ways to arrange something. So we often refer to it as disorder. So the higher the disorder, the higher the entropy. What I explained is the concept of Gibbs free energy, which uses these two factors of enthalpy and entropy as well as temperature in an equation to explain
to give a state of some system, right? It gives the energy, the Gibbs free energy gives you, it's like a little image of what state the system is in based on these thermodynamic factors, right?
And then I applied this to protein folding, and I explained how in the second law...
Before that, maybe, what do we mean by protein folding? What is this problem of protein folding that physics tries to solve?
So in our body, we have DNA that is translated to RNA, and then it goes through organelles that is called ribosome. Right. And that translated into a chain of amino acids. And these amino acids are basically a 2D shape. Mm-hmm. And then
it's just a sequence of amino acids sort of in a long chain. Mm-hmm. But the protein, the way it works, is what happens to this chain?
It folds in a certain way that makes it a unique type of protein.
Right, and three-dimensional.
In three-dimensional.
Right.
And the problem that scientists try to solve is how do proteins shape in certain ways and not in other ways.
Right. So to summarize, basically the idea is that the way a protein works, it's like a tiny mechanical robot. And the way it works depends on its shape, and the way its shape is the way it folds, and the way it folds depends on the sequence of these amino acids. So the idea is that you have this very, very, very long chain of amino acids, sometimes in the thousands, sometimes tens or hundreds of thousands, and they have interactions. There's parts that are positively charged, negatively charged. Some parts are hydrophobic, some parts are hydrophilic. And in the different environments, there's lots of different forces pushing and pulling on different sides. And it so happens that the way these interactions all come together will push and pull and, shape this thing to give it this three-dimensional shape. But it is such a complex set of interactions, we were never able to look at the sequence of amino acids and predict what shape it'll have, or look at the shape and predict what the sequence is. This was the question of problem, the protein folding. How has biophysics so attacked the problem and helped us solve it, if it has?
So by studying the Gibbs free energy of said protein, or said the chain of amino acids, you can determine that the protein will always fold into the lowest energy form.
Right.
And what I explained is that by studying the Gibbs free energy of the chain of amino acids, it works kind of counterintuitively because the second law of thermodynamics says that a system with high entropy has a higher energy. Well, a system always goes from high energy to low energy, and high entropy is high energy, and high entropy is low energy, and low entropy is high energy. And therefore, when you look at a protein that is folding, when it goes from a chain of amino acids, it has high entropy and therefore low energy, and then it goes into a folded shape, which is low entropy and therefore high energy. So it works backwards in a way. And the way that you can explain that this is a favorable spontaneous process is by looking at Gibbs free energy that explains why it works in the opposite way.
Right. Just so we're clear about it, when we talk about high entropy, low entropy, so I think the classic way of looking at it is if you look at a messy room, it's a very high entropy system, which means that basically there's many ways of being messy. But an ordered room is a very low entropy system because there's very few states where it can be ordered in this way. And the interesting thing that you point out is because the Gibbs energy contains a term for the energy coming from entropy and the energy coming from enthalpy, even if the entropy is becoming lower because the folded protein has a very specific shape. It's a very structured, very ordered sort of a state. It will have a high energy, but the global energy of the system, Gibbs free energy of the system, will be lower, which is what determines what the most stable form is, right? And these ideas of using Gibbs free energy, using entropy are very physics-oriented, very physical notions, and until we brought them in, it was very difficult to just give a biological reason or a chemical reason why proteins would fold in this way. Although the problem was still a very difficult one to solve, do you know how the problem was solved very recently? Because there's very complicated calculations, difficult ones.
I'm not sure.
No? Well, we'll have one of our final groups, we're talking about artificial intelligence, which is going to probably talk about that because one of the ways that this was done was with an artificial intelligence that Google built. All right. So that was a question of protein folding. Let's go on to another one of these applications, Anatole.
Yes.
You talked about using physics notions and techniques to study the flow of blood. So you want to go into some details for us?
Yes. First, I define what the flow is. I said that it was the circulation of blood through the vessels. And I said that the pressure of blood decide which way the blood is moving, because blood moves from a higher pressure to a lower pressure.
Right.
And for example, if the pressure was the same throughout all the vessel, the blood will just stagnate.
Right. If there's no difference in pressure between 2 points, there's no movement, right? We've seen this in other parts of physics. You need to have different potential energy for something to move. You need different electrical potential energy for electrons or charged particles to move. It's the same with pressure. If you don't have a difference in pressure, everything is the same. There's no reason for things to change. Okay.
And then I talk about the Eigen-Poiseuille equation.
Okay. What is that?
It say that the flow is equal to pi time the pressure time the radius of the vessels,
right,
power 4,
right,
over 8 time
eta.
No, 8.
Oui, but the little symbol there is eta.
Ah, okay. Which is the viscosity time the length of the tube.
Right. So basically what you're saying is that the way it flows depends on different parameters. For example, if the vessel is a wide one or if it's a restricted one. If, for example, the pressure is higher or lower. If the blood is more viscous or more liquid. Or if it's a long distance to go and a short distance to go.
Yes.
It's interesting that the factor which has the most important influence on this is going to be the radius of the vessel, right? Because the fourth power. Okay, so go on.
And I'll talk about the blood pressure. And I said that the blood pressure was a force on the muscular walls of the blood vessels.
Right.
And I said that the blood pressure was not the same, and it is different between during the systolic time and diastolic time.
Yeah.
Systolic is when the heart contracts and push the blood through the arteries, and it is when at this time the blood is at this higher level, and there is the diastolic pressure between the rest between two heartbeats,
right,
and that when the blood is at its lowest level. Okay. And this is why when you take your pressure measurement, there is 3 figures. The first is the systolic pressure, the diastolic pressure, and the heartbeat.
Right. So basically what you're telling us is that we can use notions coming mainly from mechanics of fluids to build a model of how the blood would behave if we know the different parameters like the pressure, the size of the vessel, and all these things, which is pretty useful if we want to figure out, for example, what a certain pressure value might mean when we measure it, because we can then make inferences about maybe the vessels have gotten smaller or bigger, or if the viscosity of the blood has changed. And these are very important if you want to diagnose various diseases that you have there. Okay, what else did you find in terms of applications?
I found out there is several things that can change the pressure.
Right.
For example, the viscosity.
So can you give us a very short idea of what we mean by viscosity?
It is not very. It's like if it is very liquid or.
Right. If it's how thick, I guess, the liquid is.
Yes.
So basically, it's a measure of how much the liquid is resisting flowing, right?
Okay.
So I should also say that, Anatole, you're the only one of the three who doesn't do physics this year, but you're doing a good job of it, because your brother is doing physics, and I think, are you still planning on doing medicine?
Yes.
Right. So this is stuff right up your alley.
Yeah.
Okay. So go on. You were saying you're talking about the viscosity of it.
And I said when the blood, for example, thickens, the heart need to push harder the blood because there is more resistance. And I said that, for example, when you stress, you release a hormone called epinephrine that constrict the key vessels.
Right.
So this is the reason why your heart beats faster when you're stressed.
So basically, we can look at your equation and just say, okay, what happens when, for example, the term for viscosity becomes higher?
Yeah.
And because it's a denominator, when it goes higher, then the flow becomes less. And what happens when there's a restriction of the vessel? Well, R becomes smaller. So if R becomes 2 times smaller, 2 to the power of 4 is 16, then that means the flow is going to be 16 times higher, right? So we can look at all these different factors and really have a good idea of the model of this, and then maybe think about, okay, how can we solve the problem? Okay. Anything more that you looked into in terms of applications?
Yeah, I talk about the two types of flow.
Right. What are the two types of flow?
Laminar and turbulent flow.
Right. And this comes straight from fluid mechanics, stuff that you guys, well, not you, but your brother and Celeste have done this year. What is the difference between laminar flow and turbulent flow?
For the laminar flow, all the layers are straight.
Right. So if we look at the way particles move, they're going along straight lines almost, right? Okay.
And turbulent flow is when all the layers are messy. For example, when you see behind a plane, the wind became very...
Right. If we look at, for example, the trails behind airplanes, you're saying when they're going through air, we can look that they turn in little, what we call vortices, and they that's turbulent flow. Right, it's not following straight lines. So why is it important to know what the difference is between turbulent flow and laminar flow? How does that relate to the blood? Maybe
because I don't really know, but
so what happens with turbulent flow, for example? What is
it make a sound?
It can make a sound, right? So if we can hear
for example,
sound,
when you take your measurement, you hear a sound,
right?
And because when you take your measurement, you constrict your key vessel, and suddenly you stop doing it,
right?
And the blood, I know it's a bad. There's a difference between radius, and that's create laminar flow.
Right. So basically, what you're trying to say is that when we take your blood pressure, there's this little air-filled band that they put on your arm, and it becomes really restricted. But by restricting it, you're making the vessel smaller. And when vessels become smaller, the blood goes more quickly. And when blood goes above a certain level, above a certain speed, then it goes from laminar flow into turbulent flow. And we can hear that, this transition from one state to the other.
And I said that this number is called the Reynolds number.
Right, Reynolds number, which is a very important parameter in the study of fluids and fluid mechanics. Okay, so all this stuff is very useful in cardiology, I guess, and studying the cardiovascular system. Let's look at another application, maybe. Oscar, did you want to talk to us about any other things? No? Have we made the rounds of the stuff you guys found?
Yes.
Okay. So is it something that... what did you guys find interesting in the researches that you guys did, first of all? Did you find it difficult? Did you find it interesting? Did you find it...
I think it was kind of difficult because biophysics is a very broad subject.
No.
So we couldn't present everything. We kind of had to pick and choose. And for example, my part, I kind of had to do a lot of research for it. And to explain something, or just one example, you have to go really into it and explain everything. So we didn't present much, but it was more into details.
Yeah, I think the problem is that with many interdisciplinary subjects, you have to have both disciplines have a minimum knowledge.
Yes.
And for example, I know, Celeste, you're not doing any biology. I think you haven't done any since last year. You're doing biology, for example. Anatole, you're not doing physics or biology this year. You're more in the humanities stream. So you have to do a lot of research in different topics, you're saying. Do you remember of any other topics in biophysics that you guys came across that you didn't necessarily research too much into, or just that you could have maybe looked into? Because like you said, it's a very vast topic.
I don't know. We just take the main.
Okay. Well, for example, physiotherapy or anything that's what we call in French kinésithérapie, you know, people who want to work with there's lots of biomechanics in there, right? If you're looking at the way how to re-educate somebody who has, you know, broke a leg, and making the way muscles work, the way they're connected to the bones and everything, that's all pretty much biomechanics. It's all mechanics, right? That you guys have done this year. Some of the topics would be like medical imagery, everything from radiology to scanning technology to MRI. All that is basically physics, right? It's either studying X-rays or studying waves and vibrations with echography, and doing more complex stuff with magnetic fields with MRI. Oscar, did you find the research that you did interesting, especially because you're the one who's looking to go into medicine? Did you find it anything that you think would be interesting later on, or I don't know, how did you feel about that?
Yeah, it's very interesting because we research how the cells works to find and develop new treatments for disease, for example, and it's very interesting and very difficult at the same time.
So I guess it shows also that nowadays, at least, you can't really do medicine without doing a fair bit of physics in the end. Especially, there's lots of technical stuff. And I guess for someone like you, Celeste, who's looking to go more into engineering, there's lots of engineering, I guess, that's related to the medical field and biomedical field, which is very pure physics and engineering, but it's applied to the biological domain. Any final comments, guys? Do you guys want to add anything? I don't know, maybe stuff that we forgot to talk about, or that you thought particularly worth bringing up? No, we've made the rounds. All right. Well, you know, thank you to all three of you guys. Your presentation was very interesting. I know it was a bit of a tough topic, but you guys did a pretty good job of it. And that's it.